We interrupt our programming. This is a national emergency. Important details will follow. The emergency alert system has been activated.
I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are. And it's not what is necessary to defeat the terrorists.
Obama's running first of all, he's running the biggest terrorist operation that exists, maybe in history.
The FISA court works. The separation of powers works. Our Constitution works.
You know, when I came into this office, I made two commitments that are more important than any commitment I make. Number one, to keep the American people safe, and number two, to uphold the Constitution.
They're violating the foundation of this entire country, of what our entire foundation of why this entire government was formed. It's founded with the Constitution and the rights given to the people in the country under that Constitution.
And that includes what I consider to be a constitutional right to privacy and an observance of civil liberties.
But the problem here is that no line has been drawn. The government is simply collecting everything. And to argue that this strikes a balance between national security and civil liberties, I think is ridiculous. There's no balance at all here. There's nothing in place to protect civil liberties. Everything is collected.
Now, the programs that have been discussed over the last couple of days in the press are secret in the sense that they're classified, but they're not secret in the sense that when it comes to telephone calls, every member of Congress has been briefed on this program.
Congressional members are on this surveillance too. It's not, no one's excluded.
Many members of Congress dispute this notion that Congress authorized this program, including one of the legislators who was one of the authors of the Patriot Act has said that this is not the kind of thing that Section 215 was meant to authorize. Senator Wyden, who you quoted just a minute ago, has said that this is a program that the law was plainly not meant to authorize. So there's
with respect to all these programs, the relevant intelligence committees are fully briefed on these programs. These are programs that have been authorized by broad bipartisan majorities repeatedly since 2006.
It's very, very difficult, I think, to have a transparent debate about secret programs approved by a secret court, issuing secret court orders based on secret interpretations of the law.
Congress can't sanction a violation of the Constitution. Even if Congress had authorized all of this, there's still the question of whether it's constitutional. And that's something for a court to decide, not for Congress.
There's no American who's going to be snooped on in any way unless they're in contact with some terrorist somewhere around the world.
But to have an industrial scale surveillance system that's tracking my every activity and every transaction, every movement, and combining all this information together, that Stasi in East Germany would have drooled over this capability.
And so I think at the outset it's important to understand that your duly elected representatives have been consistently informed on exactly what we're doing.
It's not possible for the Congress to do the kind of vigorous oversight that the President spoke about if you can't get straight answers.
Comes to telephone calls. Nobody is listening to your telephone calls.
Would know. So now we get every Verizon customer, 113 million of them, participating in 1 billion phone calls a day, are potential suspects in the minds of the intelligence community of the United States because they might be speaking to someone overseas. They're looking for a needle in a haystack, and they have eviscerated the privacy rights of every piece of straw in the haystack, and that doesn't trouble them.
I hear you saying I have no problem with what NSA has been doing.
Well, let me finish. Because I don't. That's not what this program's about. as was indicated, what the intelligence community is doing is looking at phone numbers and durations of calls. They are not looking at people's names, and they're not looking at content.
That the NSA doesn't limit itself to foreign intelligence. It collects all communications that transit the United States. There are literally no ingress or egress points anywhere in the continental United States where a communication can enter or exit without being monitored and collected and analyzed.
If these folks, if the intelligence community then actually wants to listen to a phone call, they've got to go back to a federal judge, just like they would in a criminal investigation. So I want to be very clear. Some of the hype that we've been hearing over the last day or so, nobody's listening to the content of people's phone calls.
But I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
Now, with respect to the internet and emails, this does not apply to U.S. citizens, and it does not apply to people living in the United States.
Beyond that, we've got PRISM, which is a demonstration of how the U.S. government co-opts U.S. corporate power to its own ends. Companies like Google, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, they all get together with the NSA and provide the NSA direct access to the back ends of all of the systems you use to communicate, to store data, to put things in the cloud.
Now, having said all that, the modest encroachments on privacy that are involved in getting phone numbers or duration without a name attached and not looking at content, that on net, it was worth us doing.
Well, guess what? The Fourth Amendment was written to prevent this very behavior, the concept of a fishing expedition or a dragnet. That's why the Fourth Amendment requires specific, articulable suspicion about a specific person before a search warrant can be given. Not a search warrant so vast that it covers more than half the country.
My guest today is William Binney, a whistleblower, former National Security Agency official. He was one of the first to reveal the agency's massive domestic spying program. Mr. Binney revealed that NSA sought and received access to telecommunications companies' domestic and international billing records, that it has intercepted somewhere between 15 to 20 trillion communications. Mr. Binney also claims that in order to cover its warrantless surveillance, the agency concealed it under the patriotic-sounding name Terrorist Surveillance Program. Real scandal in this whole story is the power, the reach of the surveillance state. Does this scandal prove the notion that there is no such thing as privacy in a surveillance state?
Well, yes, that's what I've been basically saying for quite some time. That's why they're building Bluffdale, because they have to have more storage because they can't figure out what's important, so they're just storing everything there. FBI has access to it.
You mean it's being collected in bulk without even requesting?
Yes.
Do you think we should all leave messages for the
Absolutely,
NSA
sure.
in our mailbox?
Sure.
Mr. Binney, you blew the whistle on the agency when George W. Bush was president. With President Obama in office, in your opinion, has anything changed at the agency? In the surveillance program, in what direction is this administration taking?
Yeah, change is that it's getting worse. They're doing more. The central government defines what is right and wrong and whether or not they target you. So it's not up to the individual, even if they think they're doing something wrong. If their position on something is against what the administration has, then they could easily become a target. They were building social networks on who is communicating and with whom inside this country, so that your entire social network of everybody, of every U.S. citizen, was being compiled over time. So they're taking, from one company alone, roughly 320 million records a day. That's how over time that's probably accumulated up to close to 20 trillion over the years.
Your former colleagues, they probably look upon you as a traitor. How do you look back at them?
Oh, that's pretty easy. They're violating the foundation of this entire country, of what our entire foundation of why this entire government was formed. It's founded with the Constitution and the rights given to the people in the country under that Constitution. They're in violation of that. And under Executive Order 13526, Section 1.7, governing classification, you cannot classify information that just to cover up a crime, which this is. And that was signed by President Obama. Also, President Bush signed an earlier executive order, a very similar one. If any of this comes into the Supreme Court and they rule it unconstitutional, then the entire house of cards of the government falls. The court is supposed to protect the Constitution. All these people in government take an oath to defend the Constitution, and they're not living up to their oath of office.
I want to ask you one other question about privacy, and this read to you a statement from a former NSA employee named William Binney, who recently told a hackers conference that the NSA is putting together dossiers on every U.S. citizen, listing who we have relations with, what our activities are. Is there any truth to that, and why do stories like this persist, that you're spying on all of us?
Yeah. First of all, it's not true. We aren't putting dossiers up on every U.S. citizen. So from my perspective, these are grossly out of the truth. They really are. To think that we would be collecting on every U.S. person, one, that would be against the law. Two, we get great oversight by all branches of the government.
Bamford writes of NSA head Alexander, quote, "Never before has anyone in America's intelligence sphere come close to his degree of power, the number of people under his command, the expanse of his rule, the length of his reign, or the depth of his secrecy."
I want the American people to know that we're trying to be transparent here, protect civil liberties and privacy, but also the security of this country.
Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for a dozen years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Admiral Clapper lied when he was asked by Senator Wyden, "Admiral, are you surveilling tens of millions of Americans and gathering information about them?" Answer, no, sir.
The NSA lied about the existence of this tool to Congress and to specific congressmen in response to previous inquiries about their surveillance activities.
We've essentially seen a revocation, the revoking of the fundamental underpinnings of this country since 9/11.
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can by any means possible that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. And then they can use the system to go back in time and scrutinize every decision you've ever made, every friend you've ever discussed something with, and attack you on that basis to sort of derive suspicion from an innocent life and paint anyone in the context of a wrongdoer. I don't want to live in a world where everything that I say, everything I do, everyone I talk to, every expression of creativity or love or friendship is recorded, and that's not something I'm willing to support. It's not something I'm willing to build, and it's not something I'm willing to live under. So I think anyone who opposes that sort of world has an obligation to act in the way they can. This is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong.
And it just feeds on itself because it becomes this pathological desire to just acquire everything you can possibly know. And that was the Stasi motto, literally to know everything.
And it's going to get worse with the next generation and the next generation who extend the capabilities of this sort of architecture of oppression. The greatest fear that I have regarding the outcome for America of these disclosures is that nothing will change. People will see in the media all of these disclosures. They'll know the lengths that the government is going to grant themselves powers unilaterally to create greater control over American society and global society. But they won't be willing to take the risks necessarily to stand up and fight to change things, to force their representatives to actually take a stand in their interests. Say that because of the crisis, because of the dangers that we face in the world, you know, some new and unpredicted threat, we need more authority, we need more power, and there will be nothing the people can do at that point to oppose it, and it'll be turnkey tyranny.
The President outlined last week that these are important national security programs to help keep Americans safe and give us tools to fight the terrorist threat that we face.
I can tell you this, these programs are within the law.
What about all of these leaders who have implemented this and are now standing up defending this? What's your take on them as a group and as individuals?
They are unworthy of their jobs as guardians of our liberty under the Constitution.
Who is?
Whoever authorized this, whether the president authorized it, whether the attorney general authorized it, whether the judge who was appointed by President Reagan and who signed the search warrant authorized it, anybody who thinks that it is consistent with the Constitution for spies in the United States of America working for the federal government to spy on more than half the country does not understand the Constitution, does not accept our values, does not understand our history, and ought not be in office.
So what do we...
You want to know your rights? I'll read you your rights right now. You have no right to remain silent. You can be searched at any time with or without probable cause. You have no right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, and effects, and cyberspace against unreasonable searches and seizures. Warrants shall issue without probable cause, supported by no oath or affirmation, to search any place without particular description of the place or cyberspace to be searched, and the persons or things to be seized. Searches shall be conducted with or without a warrant. Everything you say will be stored for use or later use against you in court or secretly. You have no right to consult with an attorney or to have that attorney present during questioning. Do you understand your rights, sir?
No.
I'll take that as a waiver. Thank you very much. Anything you say will be used from here on out.
The people who are involved in America's national security, they take this work very seriously. They cherish our Constitution. The last thing they'd be doing is taking programs like this to listen to somebody's phone calls.
This is a national emergency. Important details will follow. The emergency alert system has been activated.
I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to
We interrupt our programming. This
uphold the Constitution.
They're violating the foundation of this entire country, of what our entire foundation of why this entire government was formed. It's founded with the Constitution and the rights given to the people in the country under that Constitution.
And that includes what I consider to be a constitutional right to privacy.
Exists, maybe, in history.
The FISA court works. The separation of powers works. Our Constitution works.
You know, when I came into this office, I made two commitments that are more important than any commitment I make. Number one, to keep the American people safe. And number two,
to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are. And it's not what is necessary to defeat the terrorists.
Obama's running first of all, he's running the biggest terrorist operation that